Okay, in our last part of our database series of units where we were working with Python here, creating SQL queries and running different types of databases and creating a web page from that database which basically displays the information from the database just the way we want it in a sort of table. I'm now going to introduce you to one last aspect of sort of Python programming where we're going to look at some sort of graphics. So of course when we run our program at the minute you do get some sort of graphics with our HTML, and this is a sort of more visual way of looking at our data, as you can see in this example. Now what we obviously want to do is, if you imagine, most people probably don't look at programming code. What do you look at? You look at a program. So I have a program here, for example, where we can see something that looks a little bit like a database of some sort. This is a database here, and we've got some information in it, and it's showing, and you've got these buttons and things that you can press, and we can add new ones. Now, we could obviously spend time building something like this where, I've got these plus buttons that I can do, and I can take one away and all these kind of things here, and we can add new things, we can lock things, we've got all these different options and so on, and we've even got a menu up at the top where I can choose to print things, import, export, all of these kind of things. These are all possible, of course, in Python too, but it just takes time to create them. So what we're going to do is just add a little bit of graphics in here, and the graphics, essentially, we're just going to put in a sort of title for our program, which would, let's say, we'll call it report maker or something like that, or web report maker, something like along those lines. So how do we do graphics? How do we actually do buttons and text and a sort of window that we want to display some sort of information in? Well, we use a module to do that in Python. So as you can see at the top, we've used a few different modules here. We've got the SQLite 3 that lets us do this kind of stuff. We've got this OS one that we used to find out where our files and folders are. And we've got this web browser which allowed us to open this web page using your default browser, and then we use decimal to do decimal, right, to get decimal points. So we're going to add another module, and this one is called tkinter. It's another one that is built in when you install Python on your computer, so it comes as part of the Python package, and this one's a really good one to get started on doing graphics. So we're going to use this tkinter module. Now I've imported it this way. So when you do import tkinter in this method, it means that you have to write tkinter before you use any of the sort of functions and methods that come from the module. So you notice the way where I imported from SQLite 3, import everything, I didn't have to write SQLite 3 on front of this, for example, or on front of this, and so on, okay? But as you can see for OS, for example, and web browser, down at the bottom, for OS, I had to write os.get current working directory, because this bit comes from my OS, but the way I've imported it, I've done that way. So we're going to leave it like this, import tkinter, and do exactly the same thing. So we have it in this method as well, so that you will be able to see all the kind of bits of code that come from the tkinter module. Okay, so if we just put this at the very bottom of our code, we'll leave this web report at the moment, just leave that there, and we will just code. Now we're not going to put this in a sort of function or anything, so usually we're doing this where we're doing def web report, and we did def query, and we did def con. But what we're going to do is we're going to create something that will call that web report here, so it'll actually run this. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is just put a comment saying, we're going to say GUI, right, which stands for the graphical user interface. That's what that stands for. Okay, so I'll bring this over here a little bit so you have it centered. So just GUI. Now, what we do is we create a variable. We'll call it win. Sometimes, if you look up on the internet anything about tkinter, you might some people call it root, as in like the root window. Okay, I'm just going to call it win, short for window, right, to help you understand it. Now, any of the functions that come from tkinter need to be capitalized. So it's like here, if you imagine there's OS and then this bit here needed to be capitalized. In this case, it doesn't. So from the OS module, we don't need to capitalize this, and we didn't need to capitalize open, for example, from web browser. But from tkinter, we do. So we're going to write tkinter dot, and then a capital T, small k, open and close brackets. Okay, so that would be the main thing that we will do there. And the next thing we will also do is we will do win dot main loop. Okay, now the win dot main loop, this is a method that we're applying to this variable win. This, we'll put a comment beside it, creates a window. Okay, and this, well, it basically loops the graphical user interface. So if it needs to be updated, it will, we can have that so that it'll update. Okay, it'll work without this line, but this is the 2 lines so far, and this will work right now. We can turn off web report if you want. We'll just turn that off for the moment. So I've just put a hash symbol to turn that into a comment. So that's basically like turning off a line of code. And if you now run this, you're going to see a little window pop up, right? So that's pretty cool. Now, it looks a little bit different in Windows, of course. I'm on a Mac, so you will in Windows get a little icon, but Mac don't really go for icons. The only icon you can see is the Apple icon up at the top there. You've obviously got the icon for the apps and things down here, but here you would in Windows get a little icon too. And the little icon is a little feather. Now, obviously, you can change all of that kind of stuff. All those things, settings can be changed. Now, you can see by default, we just get this little box, and that is our window that we've made, and it says TK here. So we can obviously change that. You can change the background color of your window and so on as well. There's lots and lots and lots of different little bits and pieces that we could change. And the more you change it, well, the more you personalize it. So congratulations on getting that little window first of all. Let's first do the first thing. We might want to, for our little window here, we could do something like change this title and then maybe put a sort of title for our application in there too. Okay, so down here at the bottom, I'm just going to put some spaces so this is up higher so you can see everything, right? So don't worry about web report down there. We're just going to leave that off. Right, so I'm going to put everything, I'm going to have win main loop at the bottom. I'm going to actually just remove web report for the moment. So now none of this actually gets executed. So none of my code all the way up here gets executed. Nothing happens. It only does this window at the minute. Okay. So the next thing we could say is we could put a little title. So we'll use this method called title, and in the title we can put the name that we want, right? So I'm just gonna call this DB web reports maker, right? So this is my program name. You can call yours whatever you want. Give it a cool name if you want, if you can think of something nice to do that with, right? So the next thing after that, well, we could do things like, there's loads of different ones. So there's things like this is title. We could do things like geometry. We can do it so it's resizable. We can then set things like text font size and so on, but I'm just going to leave that for now, right? So there's so many different settings, and you can look some of these up. So look there, you can see in the title at the top, DB Web Report Maker. Okay, so the next thing what we want to do is, as I said, is do a title. Okay, now with the title, you use something called a widget. So underneath, I'm going to then just basically put just here saying what these are, widgets for app, I'm going to call that. And the first thing is going to be a label. So a label in tkinter, we can actually just write tkinter dot and then capital L and then for label and then do label and then the brackets. So I'll show you how that works. So we do tkinter dot label and open and close brackets. Now this creates it. Okay, so if you notice in here, what I need to do is say where this label is going to go here. So we've got a few attributes that we've got to put inside of label here. These are like kind of parameters. You would say these are parameters that I need to give this label. So one of them would be, the first one is always that I need to put it in the window. And you might be thinking, how do I know how to do this? Well, I've just looked it up on the internet, right? So I've looked up the information about tkinter and the different things that we can do, like labels and buttons and drop down lists and all these kind of things that you can do as part of programming. Okay, so the first thing, as I said, we say we want it to go inside our window, right? So that's this window here. Okay, and I then separate them by commas, and there's lots of different parameters we can give. We don't have to give them, but we can ones that you do put in will get taken into account. Okay, so the next thing we can do is just put some text in there. So we'll just say text equals and put what we want in there. So I'm just going to say the same as my title, right? Okay, so db web report maker. Now if I run this, you will notice I'll not get any error messages, but it hasn't put it in my program. It hasn't put that text. Now the reason for that is because what you've actually got to do is add an extra bit to this. So this creates it. This creates a label, but we actually need to say that we want to put it in the window, right? So we're saying that it's going to be in the window, but we haven't said put it in the window. Now there's several ways of doing this. There's one way that's called .pack, and we'll just probably do that for the moment. So it's like packing the widgets into my window as such, if you want to think of it that way. Or there's other ones like .grid and there's .place. Now I quite often use the .place and then I specify X and Y coordinates and things like that. But we'll just do, to make the .pack, which we don't have to actually put anything in there, and we just do that on the end, right? .pack like so. So if I run this, there you go, right? So it's made my window smaller, so it's actually making the window the size of whatever's in it. So I've got a widget here that is like that. Now you can see the .pack, what it does, it actually puts the text in the center, it centers it. So if I did want it to be over on the left, I would have to do something a little bit different for that. But there you go, you can see that it's centered it, and the window, when it creates the window, obviously it just creates the window actually to the size of whatever's in it. So I've got one widget, which is that one, right? So we could just do a few more different things. What about, let's say we specify a font and a font size and things like that. So you can do all of this as well in here. So if I wanted to make this title a lot bigger, I could do font, and I would say that the font is equal to, now when you do the font you can specify a few different things. Now if I want to give a few different things, like I want to say that I want to put Verdana as my font, that's fine, I can do that. But if I want to add some more information, so you can now see, I don't know if it looks all that much more different to be honest, but that is now Verdana supposedly. If I changed it to times see if that one works. All right, you can notice the difference there, right? So you can see the text has gone to times. Now you can look up the fonts. Now the fonts will be the fonts that you have on your computer. So if you're running this app on a different computer, so if I type in here fonts, font book or something, I think it is, font book. No, not finding it. If I just do a search, font book, right, there you go, right? So I've got these fonts in my computer. And if you're on a Windows machine, you will have some other fonts. Okay, so I don't have all the fonts that are possibly out there. You can see that I have these to choose from. So if you're picking a font and you want to do something that's, I don't know, a little bit different, what you're best doing is actually Googling common fonts that are available on all operating systems, because this becomes a problem. What happens if this font doesn't exist on your computer? Well, then it can't display the text, and you don't want that if you're showing your app to somebody else or you've given it to somebody else. And in a commercial sense, you can imagine that being a problem too. Right, now we want to add a bit more information to this font. We want to add a font size. So what we need to do is put this bit in parentheses brackets. So just be careful that you can see that we've got parentheses brackets here, parentheses brackets to close that, but we also have another parentheses brackets here, which is closing this one up at that end, and then we've got two on the end here for this dot pack at the end. So now that we've got these parentheses brackets, we can just do comma separated, adding more information. So I'm going to put, let's say, 40 and just have a look at that. So put in there 40. Right, so now you can see the text is a whole lot bigger. Just leave this on the screen so you can see this. So this is what I've done. So far from my GUI, my graphical user interface, I've got a window, which this creates the window. This puts my title, which is up here, and this label just puts that on my screen. And you can see we've added three sort of parameters here, that it's going in the window, it's got that text, and it's got the font. Now you can add another one on here. You could say if you wanted it to be bold or italics and things like this. So if I do bold, I need to do this as a string. Right, so it's green, okay, it's just like I did for the Verdana, and if I run it again, we get nice bolded text. That looks brilliant. Okay, so that's what I want. Now, the next thing that we might want to do is create something like a button, and that's what we're going to do for this lesson. We're going to just create a button underneath that's going to say create web report. Okay, so the same way we did this tkinter label, we just do another one underneath, and we will do button instead. Now, I'm going to do pack as well, like that. So this is the whole line that I need to write, tkinter.button.pack to put it onto my application, and it's pretty much the same as up here. Of course, we've got a few different things that we can add, different sort of parameters, but almost the kind of same kind of stuff, right? So if I just type in win, it's going to put it in my window. If I type text and say create report or something like that, right? You could put the word go or something like that. This is going to create a button for me. Okay, so if I do F5, okay, so my button doesn't look necessarily brilliant or anything like that. It doesn't look sort of too fancy. You can just see it there. Okay, so if I'm clicking on it, there it is, create report. Now you can see obviously it doesn't do anything, so that means I need to add something else, another attribute in here to get it to do something. And you can imagine what we wanted to do. We wanted to actually run we wanted to run specifically web report. So it'll create a web report for us. That's what we kind of want it to do. Now, the other things that I might want to do with the button is, of course, make it a little bit bigger. We could do things like that by just saying the sort of width and size and all this kind of stuff you can add in. But we'll just leave it for the moment as is. And what we will do is get it to actually work, right? So to the extra bit of information, I'm doing a comic here then, is to write command. And, and the command, sorry, I lose my voice there. The command, yeah, you have to put in here the procedure or function, right? Now we put it in, and it's a little bit different from say at the bottom where I had web report, open and close brackets. That calls this one to work, right? To happen, right? That calls this one to be executed, right? To call it. We basically do the same thing here, but funny enough in tkinter, we do not include these brackets on the end. So you just got to check your name. So it does say web report like that. So take away those brackets. Well, I'm going to just take away all of that text there. It said web report. And just in here, I'm just going to have it saying web report. So just make sure in your case that you're spelling it the right way. So it is case sensitive always, right? So if I've called it web report with a capital R here, then you need to do the same. And as I said, to call it when the button has been pressed, the only difference really is that you're just not putting those brackets on the end of that. So moment of truth. Let's have a look and see if this button works. Right, so I've got my DB web report maker, and I've got a button saying create report. Press that button. Oh my goodness. It is just opened up. So whenever I press that button, it has opened up Safari and shows me this report. So this is the kind of beginning of where you're seeing an application, a real program that actually has graphics in it, right? So you're used to basically just seeing all of this code, and it's like, this doesn't look anything like a real program that you're using on your computers or on your mobile phones or on your tablets. Even TVs these days have apps all on them as well. So, this is just the start of a bit of an experience of having to do this. So what we will do is if I press this again, right, it's just reloaded it essentially. Okay, so this one button basically runs all of my code. So it creates that web page, it runs this SQL database, gets the information from the database that I've selected here. Now, what could you imagine doing as part of this program? Well, you could imagine that you could add in extra stuff here, which would be, for example, boxes or input boxes. So you can have things called, well, they're called entry boxes actually. And you could have entry boxes in here where you could say, I want to see category, country, code, product, stock, and so on, and do some of this stuff, but without the user having to know SQL itself. Because the way databases, as I showed you before, with this little program here, if you look at this program, you do not see the database, right? So here you can see I've got drop-down menus and things. You don't see any SQL, but I can guarantee you this is using SQL because it's a database and it's storing information in here. So this has all been programmed. It's probably actually been done in Python. It's very likely that this program has been created in something like Python, but it could have been created in a different language too. But the SQL bits, if I change this information in here, or I add in another, I've got a button here to let me add in a new record. What does it do? And that new record does allows me to insert new information into the database. When I press on this table, it shows me the information in the database. So that's essentially, the program has kind of got this already in place. So as I say, we could actually have it where we could set up queries. We could get it where we could put in the name of the database that we want to look at. So at the minute, yours just has products.db. You've got to actually write this in your code, but we could have it where we could have a an option to open a database file, right? So you could say open here, and you would open up whatever DB file that you've got, and you could change the database file. And then you could also then start doing different SQL statements without actually needing to know SQL specifically. So that's what we could start to look at a little bit. We probably won't have too much time to do all of this, but in future lessons, you'll be able to start working with tkinter a lot more. So that's it for today's lesson. As you can see, we've just basically done this bottom section here, which is this bit. This is all we've done today, and it's just to give you an idea of what this kind of thing looks like. Other things that you might want to do would be to add things like color and different things like that. We'll have a look at that as well in the next lesson.